Hi, this is Billy Selekane. Welcome to a conversation with Billy Selekane. It's an honor and a privilege for us to broadcast this great content for you. Like I said, we're having normal conversations with super amazing people that have achieved unbelievable things, that are growing businesses, that are expressing their gifts and talents into the world. And today, I'm with a great friend of mine, the man that I met a couple of years ago in Hong Kong, Nohal, in a different place, a different world. His name is Carl Bates, and Carl Bates is the Group CEO of the Cedar Group. Welcome, Carl.
Thanks, Billy, and it's great to be here and share this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Now, Carl, for the benefit of those that don't really know who you are, please give us a synoptic background of who you are.
Okay, so I'm a New Zealander living in Africa.
Yeah.
Have been here for a number of years, working in small and medium enterprise, private business and family companies. And more recently, very focused on private companies and family businesses across the continent. I worked all over Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, Mauritius, Namibia. So got a real context for the African continent.
Yeah.
And what we do as an organization is we educate, appoint and guide high performance boards for private companies and family businesses. So we help people understand why have independent directors, what are independent directors, who are you as a director of your own business. We help them understand that, we help them find directors for their own businesses, and then we help them appoint those people into their businesses.
Cool. Now, when you're talking about board, of course, it has to do with governance. And one of the critical things about small businesses' inability to step up and get into the real big contracts is the fact that they've got a very ineffective governing structure. How important is it for us, for an SMME, to really begin from inception setting up a board?
I think it's all about where do you want to go. If you want to be a small business that's what we call a craftsman or a craftswoman, who's great at your trade, who's brilliant at what you do, but you're not looking to create a big business, then don't worry about it. But if you're serious about entrepreneurship, if you want to grow a big business, if you want to have a lot of staff, if you want to grow a business that's going to create meaningful economic impact for South Africa and for Africa, then you've got to understand the role of a board from day one.
Okay.
It's not something you do when you get there.
Okay.
It's something you do the moment you decide to go on the journey, the moment you decide to start climbing.
Okay. Now, in your experience, you have worked with small businesses across Africa now, and private and family owned. When you start entering into this space, what are the glaring things that sort of says, oof, if they don't really get this right, they might see themselves into trouble?
Well, we see it all the time. We see people who don't understand the difference between their role as a shareholder, a director, and a manager. It's quite funny. We become a shareholder in our own business. We sign the form. We become a director at the company's office. And we wonder, that the knowledge of being a director is just going to come to us through some form of divine intervention. It's as though we think that through signing the form, automatically we know what it means to be a shareholder, a director, and ultimately a manager. And so the biggest thing we see is people not understanding that they have to separate their hat as a shareholder to their role as a director, ultimately to their role as a manager.
And if you look at, there's this thing about, we should be open about it, there's this huge thing about corruption in Africa, that people are cutting corners. Now, in your experience, is your company able to bring back a company that has taken the wrong turn?
I think like anyone, you can change. And you can choose to change as an organization and change the trajectory of your organization going forward. So if a business has been in the space of being a corrupt business, being a business that hasn't filed tax returns, that hasn't complied with the law, you're never going to get rid of that history. It's a little bit like a criminal record that's on your agenda. But often you can sit down with the relevant organizations and say, this is what we've done. We want to clean up our act and we want to continue to create economic activity for the country and find a pathway. Now, generally a good independent director isn't going to join the business until that has happened, but they can support the process. So I think you can change.
And where do you source these people? I mean, where do you find these independent directors?
They're all over the place. We just don't look for them. We have a pool of independent directors that we work with. We have a market of people that we go to when we're looking for an independent director for a private company. So they're there. It's not as though they're not.
And they're always willing to come on board and make things happen. And their fee structure are they expensive people? Are they expensive people, or it depends on the complexity of the business?
So it depends on the complexity of the business. It depends on the type of person you're looking for. ultimately I say to people who ask me that question, because people sort of say, you know, but they're expensive. How much do they cost? You know, I can't afford it. I turn around and say, so if you're turning over, or got a business turning over, let's say 20 million rand a year, as a small example, would you be happy paying your chief financial officer 100 rand a day? And of course you wouldn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
But people want to pay their independent director as though they're some small time, you know. So what we say is it's about where you're at and where you're wanting to go. If you want to become an international player, if you want to become an international sports team as an example, you need an international coach. You can't take some club rugby guy, make him the head of the Springboks, in terms of the coach of the Springboks, and expect the Springboks to be a great international team.
Absolutely.
So the same applies with your directors. It's all about where do you want to go, and who is going to be the right people, who are going to be the right people to sit around the table and support you on that journey.
Okay. Now, what inspired you? I mean, before you started SIDA, what business were you in?
So I've been an independent director since I was 18. I became a chartered accountant at university, and I became chief executive of the New Zealand Council on Healthcare Standards. So I spent some time in public sector and non-profit, and then ultimately in my own business. And what I saw from having the opportunity to be an independent director of other people's businesses at a young age, and comparing that to what my family were doing in our family businesses, I mean, we're missing a trick. You know, so often as entrepreneurs, we run our own business very differently to the way in which we expect you to run yours if we're a shareholder in your business. And we think that for some reason, because your business isn't mine, you know, my business is special, it's unique, it's different, I don't have to run my business the way I expect you to run yours if I'm a shareholder in your business. And I realized that until businesses shift their thinking and accept that in order to be a big business, you've got to stop playing by small business rules.
Absolutely.
And big business rules include the role of independent directors sitting around the board table, holding management accountable, even if the managers or the chief executive is also the shareholder.
Absolutely, yeah, because in most cases it's the chief and the Indian war, you know, he's the chief and he's also the Indian, and therefore there's a bit of a mix between the state and the church, as they say, you know, the executive and the strategic direction of the board. Now, being in New Zealand and coming into first South Africa and then into Africa, what were the blockages that you experienced beginning with this journey of building SIDA?
So I didn't understand the way in which business operates in South Africa to begin with.
It was kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
How weird was it?
Well, I tell you what, I remember the day I found out I needed foreign exchange approval for paying money to New Zealand. That was like, but what do you mean I need someone to approve paying New Zealand? Because in New Zealand you don't have those rules. What do you mean it's going to take 6 months to open my company? Like in New Zealand, you can do that in a day. So there were things like that were interesting. But on the other side of things, I found people were very receptive because there's a lot of South Africans moving to New Zealand and Australia and other places. And I think people seeing a New Zealander coming here was like, this brother knows what's going on. He knows that there's an opportunity. And of course, being an All Black, just like you, of course,
so a lot of people don't really understand that you're a true All Black.
Exactly. So that made people, I think, open their arms to the role that I could play in business here in South Africa and in Africa.
Now, what's interesting is you're talking about boards and fiduciary duties. Now, let's look at state-owned enterprises. All of them are in a state of complete flux. Actually, all of them will probably go and get the Oscars because all of them, this acting CEO, acting this, you know, the Oscars that are coming up, you know, most SAA is going to pick up one or two there. So what do you think is wrong? What are people, what's wrong? What is happening there?
So look, we don't work in the public space in terms of appointing boards, but I'll give you a couple of comments. I think first of all, we don't look at our boards based on the skill and ability required to sit around the table, and we have too much politics in the way in which we select directors. In New Zealand, we have a thing we call the Crown Monitoring Unit. And the Crown Monitoring Unit is the department within government, well, it's more like a business unit within government, who's responsible for appointing directors to boards of state-owned entities. In South Africa, the minister or the president
Or the Guptas.
or the
I mean, serious, we know these guys. They appoint people, The people are sitting there because they went to the Shibin in Jackson World, and suddenly, things are falling apart. However, I think there's an opportunity for you, which you probably don't see. And maybe I'll take that opportunity and then you come behind me. Because I'm thinking that there's an opportunity to create a business that will support the appointed boards.
Yes.
Almost like coach the boards and say to them, listen, we don't care about your politics, but we're going to help you to become an effective board member so that you're able to deliver value to the SOE, and the SOC in turn delivers value to the government. I think there's that gap.
So funnily enough, we have a brilliant program we work with called the Sadara Applied Directorship Program, which is exactly for that purpose. It's about being practical and understanding your role as a non-executive director. What does it take to be a high-performing director? What does it take to be a high-performing board? And to take people through the process over time. I think too much of the engagement around directors and the training of directors is one-day workshops, one-day learning. It's not taking someone on a journey,
Yes, absolutely.
and demonstrating what it means to be a director, which is exactly what we do.
So what is the minimum time that a person becomes a non-executive director in the companies that you work for?
How long are they a director?
Yeah.
So we would expect the minimum time being 3 years,
Yes.
the maximum being sort of 5 to 6
Because
years.
then you need succession and stuff,
And rotation, and you need new ideas, and you need people with new energy and new focus. The role of an independent director needs to be kept fresh.
Now, CEDA, does it also have independent directors?
Funnily enough, that's a brilliant question. So we are a small business in South Africa. So we say businesses that require independent directors need to or should be operating at about 20 or 25 million rand. So in the South African business, we don't have independent directors right now. We had an chair lady. She's recently finished, and we're in the process of looking to replace her. So we're in that space of needing an independent director because we're at the right size. But yeah, we're in the process of replacing it at the moment.
Okay. Now, what is your, I mean, you're from New Zealand, you came in here and set up this thing, and now you're moving into Africa.
Yep.
Now, in South Africa, actually in the whole continent, I mean, the greatest population is young people. We've got massive unemployment of young people, which it's almost like a ticking time bomb.
Yep.
What is it that we think, family-owned business and private-owned businesses can do, not being driven by legislation, but be driven by the love of the country and saying, if we don't do something, things are going to explode. What do you think? What is it that you think they should be doing to contribute to the unemployment of young people?
I think looking at businesses that create labour requirement is obviously a key driver of employment. But I think a big part of it is also starting to think about people as people. I think there's a conversation in South Africa and in some other parts of Africa where we don't really think about what's required in terms of the ability to someone to live and support themselves. So things like the minimum wage conversation are an important part of the discussion, but that has to go hand in hand with conversations, tough conversations with unions and the like, about effectiveness and efficiency and global competitiveness. And we can't just put pressure on private business to say you've got to pay more without looking at how we create effectiveness, competitiveness in an international environment. That said, I think rather than unions and government driving the conversation about minimum wage and the value of life in South Africa, as businesses we should be driving that conversation. We should be setting the targets.
Absolutely.
We should be going, this is what we would be able to pay if we got these outcomes.
Now, there's a perception, sometimes very close to reality, that says a lot of private South African businesses would rather hire foreigners because they can pay them less and they don't have to go through the union hoops and stuff like that. And that is creating a bit of a tension between the locals and foreigners. What is it that you think is getting these private companies not to hire local people and cut the corners and hire foreigners because they can pay them cheap? What causes that? What do you think causes?
The bottom line is South Africa has to seriously look at its employment law and its approach to employment. Like the fact that I saw a sign on the M1 the other day and it said something like 110,000 successful cases taken through the CCMA last year. And I was like that number in and of itself is crazy. That just says we allow too much going through legislation or allow too much challenge for people to appoint and remove people. And if we want to be serious about the journey and the opportunity for South Africa, we have to move from 146 or 147, whatever we are on the international list in terms of employment law, to number 10 or number 15 or maybe number 25. We've got to have fundamental change in employment law. That said, the fact that employment law is difficult doesn't give business the open right to appoint people who do not qualify for employment in this country. And there is a moral obligation to, as employers, start thinking about what are you doing to utilize employment in this country if you wish to live with the benefits of being a South African citizen, or in my case, a South African resident.
Because one of the things that we also sometimes lack in appreciation is the fact that South Africa is a newly established democracy. So there's been some imbalances in the past where the system favored the minority of people, created opportunities for these people, and everybody else was closed out. The educational system was crappy, still is crappy, and therefore you find that a lot of foreigners who come here, they've got a better educational standards than the locals, and that creates a bit of a disparity. Now, as you know, if you look at Germany is very high on apprenticeship, but South Africa is not high. What can we do to inspire companies to start creating apprenticeship opportunities for young people?
So I think you make a very interesting comment about being a new democracy. My challenge to South Africans would be, at what point are we no longer a new democracy? At what point as business are we going to say this is actually not acceptable? At what point as government are we going to say, if we want to have a successful economy, we need to have great employment law? At what point are we going to say, education in South Africa used to be brilliant in some parts. Why are we allowing it to go down in others? So I think there are challenging conversations that it's a little bit like everyone walks around with a chip on their shoulder saying, this is why we're allowed to say. Do you know what I mean? And I think as a foreigner, I can get away with probably saying a few things that get people thinking. And so I think the sooner we take responsibility for education, the sooner we take responsibility for employment law, the sooner we go back to your point before about boards of directors and say we actually want SAA to have brilliant directors. And if we can't find those, either in South Africa or of any particular colour of creed, we're going to find the best South Africans to do the job.
Absolutely.
And make sure we've got them. Now, I don't think that means that they're all going to be of one particular race or creed. What I do think it means is we set a standard that says we want this country to be successful.
Absolutely.
Let's make the country successful.
Makes a lot of sense, because I think, what you're saying makes sense. When are we going to say, our democracy is now matured, those kind of things? Because one of the fascinating things that any democracy is, it's got three very fundamental things that keeps it going: is the media, is the government itself, and of course the judiciary. And the fascinating thing about this country, the government is very shaky, but our judiciary and our media is very strong, holding the government accountable, telling the stories, court cases being won through the Constitutional Court. Now, more than any other government, we refer all our cases to the Constitution and we lose them. Now, if you look at small businesses, one of the biggest challenges with small business is no access to capital. I mean, there was a Twitter that went around that says, if you go to Standard Bank, you want to buy a house, they'll give you the bond. You want to buy a house, they'll give you you want to buy a car, they'll give you a loan. You want to buy a house, they'll give you the bond. You want to start a business, they'll regret you. So
I think we're getting into a nice challenging conversation, and this is probably going to stir things up. So I want to take a step back, and then I'm going to come back to capital. My challenge on the three legs and the new democracy, mature democracy conversation is, would you call America a mature democracy with your current president? Now, some people would, some people wouldn't. That's not my point. My point is, democracy is always a evolving, improving thing. And so I think the conversation doesn't need to be, have we moved from a new democracy to a mature democracy? The conversation needs to be, are we going to be a democracy? Are we going to allow the government to be the government and make decisions because they're the government? Are we going to allow the president to make the decisions? And if they're not, remove them regardless of whether or not they're the leader of a particular party who's done a huge amount for South Africa, but may not be doing that now. Now, I don't have enough understanding of the politics of South Africa to make that call. I'm just putting a couple of questions into the context, right? So then you move to the question of capital. And I think the same feeling and approach to the challenges with employment and government and business come to the conversation about capital. And I think that is that I think South Africans like to use it as an excuse. I think we use these things as reasons why we're not achieving. Why is South Africa falling behind the continent of Africa?
Absolutely, yeah.
As a powerhouse.
I mean, Ethiopia is the fastest growing economy now, which is kind of crazy. How can Ethiopia be the fastest growing economy while we have all these gizmos and taros and all these kind of amazing things?
Ethiopian Airlines is the fastest growing with the newest fleet of
the
aircraft.
Dreamliners, yeah.
Yeah, on the continent. As a country, until we change our attitude. So I say to the new business owner who says, I'm not getting my business off the ground because I don't have any capital, I say, no, that's not how it works. How it works is you create capital or you create commitment. If I was making these cups, imagine you had never bought these cups. Imagine this was the very first cup that you had looked at with your brand on it. And I came to you and I said, if I was to make a cup like this for you, and I could sell it to you at, I don't know how much this costs, but let's say $5 for the and would you buy 100 of these from me with this logo done like this if I could sell it to you for $5 a cup? And you say, of course I would. Then I say, well, sign this piece of paper saying you will. Now when I take that piece of paper that says I've got someone wanting to buy 100 cups, so 500 Rand, and I go to the bank or go to someone like me, a financier or someone, and I go, here's a commitment to buy. It's going to cost me 200 Rand to make the cups. I'm going to make a profit. The bank goes, okay, here's some money. When we go to the bank and we go, I've got this idea about making these cups.
The bank says, good luck with the idea.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think we've got to understand that. And I think as entrepreneurs, if you're listening to this and you're going, no, but Carl, my problem is capital. I challenge you to find people willing to buy the product you intend on making. And people will commit to it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because, I'm asking this question because I'm a different kind of breed. I've never started any of my business with nobody's money. I mean, this television channel, I had a conversation with a colleague and he came and says, wow, man, this is amazing. Like you said, I remember you talking about this thing and you're going to the US and whatever. So do you have any sponsorship? I said, what do you mean sponsorship? I'm old school, my man. This is my thing. And anybody that wants to come in here will come in at my own terms. Not, I'm not going to go cap in hand. And I think it's one of the saddest thing about South Africans is there's a sense that people need to be given stuff to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm a man who says, you know what, like you're saying, an idea is an idea until you can prove that somebody wants to buy it. Because all of us have got ideas, but how many of those ideas will really come to life until we bring them to life? So it's kind of we've got to shift from this kind of, we're a little pity small businessman from the township, please give us something cap in hand. And by the way, statistics for people that are given money on this from the government side as loans to start businesses, you must check the return on payment. It's scary. People don't bring the money back, which is kind of scary.
Because it's like giving money to someone who doesn't have the ability to do it. Now, I don't know how much of this conversation relates to some of those principles on the wall here, but essentially it's a biblical principle.
Absolutely.
Prove to me the ability that you've got the ability to manage money, and then we'll talk to you about giving you money.
Absolutely. Now, the CEDAR group, I mean, I've watched you, and like I said, we met in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, and it's fascinating to see the growth. Are you going to be operating from South Africa, or are you going to set up some satellite offices in the continent?
So we actually moved our main activity from New Zealand to South Africa, so our main office is in Cape Town. And we base our African activities out of Cape Town. We'll look in time to open offices across the continent. In one of our businesses, the Contribution Compass, we've got people working already in the continent and look to continue to expand that network. And I'm sure in 10 years' time we'll have offices across the continent.
Now, you're working across the continent. Do you show up there, do presentations, or do you find local people that you do a kind of a strategic partnership or alliance with?
Both. So we do a lot of provision of presentation, workshop engagement. We do a lot of work with businesses on an ongoing basis that we support out of South Africa to support South African employment. And we also look for local strategic partnerships. And it's a combination. So it's where the right fit is found is what we do.
CEDA, well, it's in the board space, making sure that companies are capacitated, but I'm told you guys have created some fantastic product that will, transform the way people see themselves and how they contribute. What is it that you've created?
So we've created a process called the Contribution Compass, which is all about understanding how as an individual you can maximize your contribution and maximize your return, both as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as a business, and for your teams. So it's about understanding that each of us brings something different to the table.
Absolutely. So is it a profiling tool?
It's a profiling platform. So the profiling tool is part of the process of understanding both your own profile and the profile of your team members, and then how to use them and integrate them in such a way that you get more benefit from the team and the time you invest in your organization.
So tell me how it works. You send me a link and I go online and I do this profile, then I get the results. So what do I do with the results that I get?
So once you've got the results, you want to understand those, so have a good read and work through them. Then get onto one of our webinars, attend one of the workshops, work with one of our facilitators, help build internal knowledge within your own business. Either we can support you, or you will have a facilitator within your business who will build internal knowledge so that you can use the tool in selecting people, selecting the right people, understanding the roles that you're looking to fill, making sure you know the type of person you want for that role, looking at the people on your team and seeing whether or not they're doing the right things in terms of creating the most value for you and for your organization. And then as you do things like open a new business or build teams in a new company or go into a new business as an employee, you can make sure that you're getting the right people on the team or going into a team where you're going to add value.
Now, a lot of these assessment tools are based on some science. Some of them are funky science. Some of them are real science. Some of them are just people creating them because they're smart. What is yours based on? What kind of science is behind your system?
So ours is based on our own understanding of a document called the I Ching, which is a document...
The Chinese book that was written 8,000 years ago. Yes.
Exactly. So translated and all of that jazz. So based on that. And then we've done a whole lot of statistical modeling to make sure that it's accurate and works extensively in the space.
Okay. So if I'm an entrepreneur out there, I have a business, I've got 9 people working for me, if there's just too much conflict, some people don't contribute, some contribute, your tool will help me to get better profiling of these individuals and make sure that I use them effectively?
Exactly. May even help you understand who should leave, who needs replaced, whether or not you're even doing the right role. So if you think about it, so often what happens is it's like school children. When they come home from school and they've got their report card, and on their report card they have an A and a B, and then they have an E. As parents, we focus on the E and we go, what are you doing? How are you getting E's? We don't congratulate them on the A. And in our businesses, it's exactly the same. We focus on our team members and their E's. We don't focus on their A's. And the Contribution Compass is all about understanding what are the A's in our team members. How do we get more of their A's and give the E's to people who are good at doing that?
Oh, that's really cool. So we're looking forward to really testing it because I want to test it myself.
Brilliantly.
So you're going to send it to me. I'm going to, go through it and make sure that it works. And if it works, I'm going to share with my viewers that, you've got to go and do this thing, because there's nothing as distracting in a business where there's too much conflict because people don't contribute based on their strength.
Just remember one thing. The most important asset in your business, the only asset that you can't get more of, is your individual time.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening, you have got one scarce asset, and that is your time. And unless you're investing your time in your business where you're going to create the most value from it, then you're not going to succeed as an entrepreneur to the degree you otherwise could.
Cool. I think, what you guys are doing is quite amazing and very, very, profound. I've been watching the journey, I've been interacting with you, and it's very fresh that you came from New Zealand, came with this idea which was there to be taken, and you did it, and you came here, you made some magic, and then the dream keeps growing. I mean, it's an honor and a privilege for us to have you here, and hope our viewers will enjoy your nuggets in the future, where you're going to be giving some small little tidbits about, what a board does, what they should be, how do they hold each other accountable, where do they get the education. So Carl, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming to have a conversation with me.
Thanks, Billy. I enjoyed that.
Pleasure. There we go. You have a small business that want to play at the global scale. You've got to begin to think about building a board. And a board is not just your friends or your cousins. People that have got the skills, that have got the aptitude, that will hold you accountable and make sure that your business grows and that you become competitive. As South Africa and as Africa, the time has come for us to stop being part of this pity party that says, ooh, we're the disadvantaged people. Ooh, we need capital from the banks. Go out there and make things happen, because nobody's going to give you money until you can prove value. And value does not come from ideas, it comes from being practical. So I'm saying, as entrepreneurs, go out there, make things happen, because this continent depends on you to really become counted again into the League of Nations. This is Billy Selekane. Peace and love.